Right. You comfy, John?
I think so.
You're right there. Is there a particular?
Good.
So
We're good.
so before I came, I was saying to my other half, I'm going up to do the interviews, and I said I don't know what I'm going to wear. I don't know what I'm going to wear, and I got this shirt out and everything else. And then last night we were going to bed, and she said, and I said, actually, I'm going to wear this jacket. And she said, I thought you were going to wear that shirt. I said, I know, but when I sit down, it gives me a little fat tummy. And I can't, it's like I can't do that. Well, it's like, when I was a kid, well, when I say a kid, anything up to the age of 30, I didn't have a stomach. It wasn't a thing. And then as just still you got older, everything's broadened out, especially when I sit down. Right. Suppose we ought to formalise this.
Yes.
Hello, John. It's nice to meet you.
Hello.
Everybody, look, it's me, and I'm with Jonathan Wells. So, chief designer, is that your title?
That's the title now, Chief Design Officer.
So, but you started as junior colouring in?
Yeah, basically. Although the art form of colouring in hadn't been widely recognised by Morgan at the time. So, essentially, I joined in actually a Morgan centenary year, so 2009.
Yeah.
100 years of Morgan. And I joined as the second designer ever. And my predecessor had only been here 2 or 3 years before me. So
where were we in car land for Morgan at that point?
So for Morgan at that point, Matt, who I can attribute, largely my career to some degree, he started before me. He had an incredible breadth of historic
Is this
car knowledge.
Matt
Humphreys.
Okay, yeah.
So incredible historic car knowledge, amazing designer, fantastic vision for what Morgan could be. And he and Charles Morgan fantasised what a modern day coupe might be for Morgan Motor Company. And on work experience, actually, he was in the corner of the R&D office, largely misunderstood by the engineers that worked there at the time as this sort of young creative guy drawing sketches. And he sketched Aramax, which was sort of an early century inspired modern coupe for Morgan, and they developed a concept car very much by taking those sketches almost literally, bending sheets of wood to replicate the forms and making it by hand. Really romantic way of creating a car form from sketches. Great. Super cool. Albeit when you're making things by hand, the process is slow. You don't have many opportunities to revise and see different iterations of designs. You're in it very early on. And the first concept car was amazing. It looked fantastic, enabled us to pre-sell 100 coupes, but there was quite a delay really in linking that concept through to final production.
Yes.
And having built the first car, there was lots that needed adjusted in terms of proportion and finessing and some of the more, the subtleties of car design.
How awesome it looks.
Mega car.
Yeah.
And guiding those highlights so they sit right on the surface and reducing visual mass.
Okay, all right.
So that essentially...
Where were you in the midst of that? You joined in the middle
during that process, yeah. So my one of the skills I was sort of, doing well in at university was surfacing and 3D modelling.
Yeah.
And so really I, helped introduce technology to the design process, if you like, at Morgan.
Yes.
And working with Matt, we're interpreting some of these sketches to turn them into 3D surfaces, rendering them up, showing the craftsman what they could look like before we actually started the laborious process.
This is
of
awesome.
metalworking.
So essentially, your background in university is product design.
Absolutely, industrial design. I studied industrial design in one of, at the time there was only 2 automotive design courses in the UK. They called them vehicle design. They covered all sorts of mobility.
Yeah.
It's ancient history, and I don't know how long we've got, but that's, I put together the things I was most passionate about and, took a degree in that subject without really knowing that I wanted to design sports cars. If anything, my passion was in 2-wheeled vehicles. I was a very keen motorcyclist, have been since an early age, mountain bikes, and to be honest, I love to draw. I had a passion for the mechanical side of motor vehicles. I liked spannering and working on cars.
Kids, listen, follow your passion.
I kind of stuck it all together. Yeah, exactly that. I like to draw, I like to imagine, I like to create, I liked building and making vehicles, and I like going fast on motorbikes. And
who doesn't?
I put those things together and discovered vehicle design course was a thing. During there, a few things happened. One, I really fell in love with clay modelling and 3D model surfacing. I could take sketches that I was drawing and turn them into 3D objects I could spin around. And that was really exciting for the younger me, still is now.
Although I'm assuming that you're just using CAD for
CAD
doing it
modelling,
now.
So CAD surfacing, and to be honest, we use CAD, and the company had a bit of CAD when we started here, but it was very much focused on component modelling and mechanical components, solid models with offsets and threads, and it's called parametric CAD modelling. My speciality was in surface modelling, so you just focus on the A surface of the car, and you use curves, and you manipulate the tension and the movement of those curves to manipulate the surface, and then you play with the way the light sits on the surface. So it's like sculpture, but in 3D. And for the craftsmen to see these 3D models before they started making them, and for the engineers to start packaging these surfaces, we started to have a modern design process.
So I'm assuming, we all know it's really, we all know with the design, I say we all know, anyone who's in the design industry will know that if you have too many chiefs and not enough Indians, you can end up with a Frankenstein design where everybody puts their oar in. Especially when people can't visualize what you're trying to get across. They can't take it from a piece of paper into what it might be in the flesh, whether it be this big or full size. So that means that you were bringing a skill set which enabled people to actually see what was going to be produced in the end, as opposed to relying on them to foresee what's going to come next.
To be honest, it was such an exciting time for the company, because Aramax had kind of turned people's heads. They went, wow, Morgan suddenly got a a six-figure supercar almost that is snapping heads around. It's an awesome looking thing. It balances everything traditional that people know about Morgan, but presents it in a modern light. And it was a landmark project. And we went straight off the back of that into a concept car called the Life Car, which was a hydrogen fuel cell powered vehicle for the future, which again was really bold in terms of its design approach. And then Matt and I did another version of the Aramax called the Aero Supersport, which was a Targa, a coupe after that one. And then we brought the new three-wheeler back, which, the new three-wheeler at the time was very much sort of replicating the style of the early ones.
Yes.
But keeping the theatre and a level of modernity to a degree.
The boys in the factory love that car.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That Super
just
3.
Pure theatre. The new Super 3 is slightly different. The new Super 3 is less about paying homage to the past. It's more about embracing Morgan's future design philosophies, which is about, rather than taking something traditional and blending a bit of modernity into it carefully, it's about celebrating modern and coach building in equal measure.
Let's just do this, because it's really cool.
We coach build because we believe it's fully relevant to the world today.
So it should be. There's not enough craftsmanship in this stuff, and when you look at any design of stuff now, everything's so generic, and it really doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter where you look, you do get that. And when I find that when I'm trying to look for things that inspire me, or things that I think are still quite beautiful in the modern world, I find myself looking at things like, forgive me, Juliet toaster, Smeg, fridge freezers, Greyhound bus, Coke bottle. I mentioned the Coke bottle and the Greyhound bus because they were both Lowy, Raymond Lowy, and I worked for Raymond Lowy. So,
to be honest, this is exactly the same as us. We don't look at the automotive landscape today for inspiration. Commonly, we'll look at the effect design movements had on cars in the past.
Yep.
So, for example, if you said that the traditional Morgan running board was a design silhouette established in the very early century, as cars started to evolve with a better understanding of aerodynamics and how those technologies affected car forms, what were the designers of that mid-century thinking about? They were being inspired by the great space race and how that started influencing things like the Greyhound bus and some of the shapes and forms, and we start to imagine almost in like a retro-futuristic way, what back then would we have been considering, and that inspires us going forward.
That's nice. I like that.
We also look at products, fashion, furniture. Material studies are hugely important for us. Morgan's celebrates all its materials very honestly: wood, aluminium, leather, and we look at new technologies.
And the furniture world's going to there's going to be loads of alignment in that as well.
So our mood boards have everything but cars on them, really.
Yeah, one of my favourite things when you're launching the Super 3 was early doors. You put out some sketches before you'd actually shown the cars. And there's some sketches on there that I almost wish had become reality. Obviously, they could never happen because they were like curved hardtops. It was like, where was anyone ever going to sit?
As you well know yourself, a sketch is a sketch. It does a lot of work to communicate an idea, and it can sell a dream.
But not the practicalities.
But for me, it doesn't get exciting until you start finding the constraints. a designer's an industrial designer is a bit like an engineer. You have to have a problem to solve.
Yes.
And you overlay that with an intent. So we have an intent to create something that triggers a certain emotion or tells a certain story. But the fun part of the job is solving problems. And for me at Morgan, I think there's a real honesty in all of our cars.
Yeah.
Super 3 is a great example. The front of that car looks like it does because what you're seeing is the engine mount. You know, those 3 aluminium castings are holding the engine.
I'm looking over there because
But
I can see one from here.
They can also hold the corners. And actually, if we sculpt them a bit, they can take the air in. And you've got this thing that, even engineer or not, you can look at it and visually read what it's doing. And that, I don't believe that level of honesty is that apparent in the modern automotive world. And I think
everything's hidden away.
Everything's got a story.
If you ever lifted a bonnet now, it's just a big sheet of plastic over the top, as if they're ashamed by everything that's going on underneath.
And you pull up in a Morgan anywhere, as you well know, as you know, all of our customers and all of us work here know. And it's always a smile. People are smiling, happy to see a Morgan. There's a fun character to it, which is right. It should be. It should be about joy. And then when you start to get under the skin, you can point to any component on the car, and there's a story. This wing beading's been hammered on all the way through. This has been shaped with an English wheel.
Yeah, and see there's
depth to it.
And so much of that is lost. So it's interesting when I see you doing your. I love the fact you always hold that smile when I'm watching like the 5th review where someone is talking to you about the design and you're talking about you're going through the sweeps and the curves and all the different bits and you're still smiling about the same story. There's parts of me that want to go, John, just tell them how it is. please just just turn around and say, look, we know we need to do this because every single Morgan owner knows that it's a little bit windy from the door. So we know that we needed to get that sorted, and we've sorted it now. Which and
I mean that's the thing. We're a very, very small company, and the one we often get is oh, the BMW gear stick. Why didn't they think to change that? Of course we considered it. We consider every part.
I have a 2-word reply for that, just so you know.
Yeah, go on.
I use it accidentally on videos.
The same reason it hasn't changed in the latest Ineos would be, comparable. These sort of electrical systems from major OEMs, to make changes is significant investment. In safety case, in testing, in durability, in programming, in life cycle stuff. Internal projection.
Can't you just make a big wooden block that just drops over the top of it?
And it's proving that block doesn't get cool or hot or moisture doesn't make an effect on a safety critical component. These are the sort of things in the automotive.
Yeah, it's all good until you put it into Sports Plus and then you electrocute yourself.
To change an airbag or a dashboard would be a 7-figure investment. To change traction control system to account for a bigger tyre would be a 7-figure investment. And these things. People don't realise the amount that goes into legislating and improving cars, and we make 700 cars a year, so they're big numbers to amortise. At the same time, people don't want to see the car's prices going up too much, so everything's a balancing act.
And that's the crazy when you actually look at the number of cars you sell, you look at the number of people you employ, and you look at how well you treat those employees as well. With, for example. There's a couple of years time off around Easter. It's like you get the Easter week,
a half day on Friday.
And it's those things that make people happier when they get back coming to work because they feel that they're invested in, so they invest back, and those sorts of things. I think it's the right thing. The offset for that is that actually you're not ripping the souls out of people for a profit.
Well, we do,
and therefore you don't.
We are lucky. People, whilst we do our half days on Fridays and shutdowns and things, annual leave is comparable to other companies, but we actually find that people go a lot above and beyond at Morgan.
You get more
across the board. I mean, people want to give to Morgan, and I've been here 15 years of my life, which is a long tenure, but there's projects that keep me interested, scores I haven't settled. Changes in management, changes in company direction. To be honest, I've worked under Charles Morgan, Steve Morris, Massimo Fumarola, now Matt Hull, and there's been 4 different chapters.
And who's best?
Everyone's got their strengths, and
you were so diplomatic.
It's been brilliant. Every well, to be honest, there's been real gear changes and shifts, and the company's always seeking to address the next thing and move on to the next thing, and it's a very ambitious company, and something we talk about a lot, this sort of idea that a Morgan incites joy. And it is a joy to work here. I'm smiling in videos because these design journeys have been enjoyable ones. You're working with craftsmen and the guys in the shop floor that do the metal work and the trimmers and the project teams and the accountants. And everyone's pulling together in this really small team with full ownership. And you do want to put the hours in. You do take it home with you. You do work on it at the weekends because it's It's more than a job, if that makes sense.
I like the fact that what you're saying marries with something that somebody else was saying earlier on. So I collared, who I'm now referring to as the wood guy.
Right.
And he was talking about the lamination techniques that he had recommended in order to achieve the stuff on the Midsummer,
Yes, okay, yeah.
for example. And for me, that's the story I want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's not about a designer designing something, someone saying this is possible, and then it happening with, almost in spite of that, that.
I don't know if it was Dave you were speaking to. Was it Dave Young?
It was everyone called Dave.
There's so many guys. Lots of Daves.
There's lots of
Johns.
Daves.
Yeah, there's lots of Matt. There's lots of the same names here. But yeah, I mean the guys there. The Midsummer project was a great example. We worked on 50 barquetas called a Midsummer with Pininfarina. First time we've ever done an exterior form collaboration with another design house. And Pininfarina, fantastic company, globally renowned. They are modern day designers. And for my team to go over there and see best practice modern design,
yes,
it was brilliant. Are you okay? Is everything working as it should?
I'm just, you pocketed up in there. So I just want to make sure that, I just want to make sure we're still, I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
We're good?
Yeah, if it's not, I'm just going to, everyone will have to turn the volume right up.
Yeah, my guys are going over there and they're, working with power walls and virtual reality suites and mixed goggles to, mixed reality goggles to walk around the car as if it's in front of you. And it's amazingly powerful. And we got a lot from that process. And then Pininfarina designers were coming here and they were having conversations with Dave Young in the wood shop about how he laminates wood together and how the grain can flow on the car. And everything they thought, was robust and finely designed. Like thinking, actually, no, there's this and there's that. And the art of the possible was directly informing the modern design. And so many companies work sort of, with broad processes. We have concept design over here in a studio and manufacturing over there.
Designers should not tell a carpenter what he can achieve with a piece of wood.
Exactly.
They can say what they'd like to achieve and the carpenter will then tell you the best way to do that and then add more as to what you can get to get the grain to show and all of those other parts.
And we are a small company, perhaps with without some of the job perks that you might have working at a big corporate company. But when an engineer comes to Morgan to work, they have total ownership of a part that they then deliver to reality. And they want to see it all the way through. Because it's theirs to own. They're not a small cog in a big machine. And it's a really rewarding place to work in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it is pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Cool. And on the subject of ambition, the other thing I'll hear quite often is, you'll say you work at Morgan, you must be good with a photocopier. And I always find that a bit surprising, really.
Because we don't have a photocopier.
I'm using one of those, it really helps. But, perhaps because our marketing budgets are this big. But in my time since I've been at Morgan, and this is what the team have delivered, but there's been, starting with Aramax, Era Supersports, Era Coupe, the Life Car concept vehicle, the Ever GT concept vehicle, the first new three-wheeler, the second new three-wheeler with the Super 3, the CXT Dakar off-road car, the GTR race cars, the CX generation of new chassis under the Plus 4 and Plus 6, countless special editions that I've lost track of, electric three-wheelers, 2 of those now. And you think of all those models, there's more models in there than there have been years I've worked here. And that is really ambitious for a team of what was 6 designers and engineers and is now no more than about 20. I think Morgan actually punch above its weight in terms of the amount of new product development we do.
I think it's great. And I should imagine that if you're working for a major manufacturer, the idea of coming up with a different concept, I should imagine gets shot down 99 times out of 100, probably more than that, just because they have to remain so rigid within their brand values, whereas you seem to have this freedom. I do need to ask a question with the positioning of the different cars that you've got at the moment. You're good for time, by the way. You're all good. Yeah. Right? We were talking about it. I think Spencer and I were talking about it, and I've seen it come up. Obviously, I'm a bit of a keyboard warrior when I'm commenting about stuff. I feel like we've now got this Super 3, which is almost like the comfortable motorbike, for crazy people.
As close as you can get to a motorcycle.
For slightly crazy people. And then you've got your classic traditional Plus 4 for those people who are really looking for like that quintessentially British sports car that feels like quite a twee British sports car. I say this from experience, I've owned one.
I know what you mean,
and then now with the Supersport replacing the Plus 6, which almost feels like it was a stopgap, a really good stopgap, you know. But now with the Supersport, I feel like that's your modern, that's your almost like your resto mod Morgan, and then you've got your classic British car, and then you have the crazies, if you like.
Yeah, the guts of it are totally there. I think there's now three very distinct product personalities, and that's always been the intention, to create as much breadth in the portfolio as we can, but with common Morgan ingredients apparent across all of them. Ultimately, you smile when you see it. It's lightweight. That's really important to us. The focus is only on the engagement with the vehicle and being fun to drive. You know, we don't compromise that in anything we do. The measure is how happy it makes you to drive an amateur enjoy driving on all of them, unanimously. And then the manufacturing techniques and the fact that every Morgan is totally exclusive. So every car is tailored to an exacting specification of the customer with the customer. Oh, so you don't get that anywhere else.
No, you don't get it anywhere else.
Not at that level.
So my question then is, that bit, that little jar, I've been talking about it with the guys, that jar of joy that you seem to pour into every single Morgan, you know, that driving joy that you get. It's not tangible. So how on earth do you get that into any of your cars?
It's a melting pot, isn't it? There's a history walking around the factory, they're seeing the 115 years of history in those red brick buildings.
But not everybody comes and looks at their cars.
Not everyone gets that, but the knowing that exists, and that there is a human at the end of the thing, not a robot. You know, this factory is powered by Weetabix. People are handcrafting the car, adds inherent value. The focus on what brings joy in the products adds inherent value. The personable human relationship. I mean, I'd love to speak to every single customer. I speak to everyone that can come here and everyone that I'm introduced to gladly. Yeah. On projects such as the Midsummer, where there's 50 customers, I will personally speak with all of them. Many of customers live rent-free in my WhatsApp. There is a very personal relationship with our customers, that not just with me, of course, with anybody you interface with at Morgan. It is a very human interaction.
Do you think that ever holds Morgan back in the fact that we as customers have too much opinion? Or too valued?
No, not
our
at all.
Opinions too valued?
Any of the designers and engineers here will say what we do create is a canvas, knowing that that's going to happen. So we create a car to be tailored. We're designing in endless personalities whilst we're considering endless personalities whilst we design the cars. Mm-hmm. So we imagine a Supersport to be able to be dressed to look quite traditional, or to look quite modern, to be very dark and aggressive, or to be very light and airy. Same with any of our cars. So we've got that big breadth in the portfolio, but those common traits between all of them. +4 and +6 were closely related. They shared the same silhouette, the same design language, but we recognised an opportunity with Supersport to appeal to a slightly different audience, focusing really on some of the nuance of living with the car, the use cases of the car, maybe a slightly more contemporary look for somebody that doesn't, want that very consistent +4. +4 is very important to us. +4 is the backbone of Morgan. It is the everlasting, timeless,
should always be there.
Yeah. And to be honest, think of luxury products, consistency is key. You think of some of the big luxury brands that spring to mind. They're very careful in how much they change and unsettle. They just present the product in different ways quite often. And that consistency, that enduringness, the Morgan +4 is like a London bus. It is just the iconic British sports car.
Everybody knows it's a Morgan when they look at it, and they never know how old it is.
But also, you can go one step level. So you can come to Morgan and live out your automotive fantasies. We had a customer come and say, actually, funny enough, they saw a sketch on our wall which inspired the idea, but they love to go rallying and off-road driving. And Morgan had a big history in endurance trials. And when we designed the CX cars, the new aluminium chassis to replace the steel chassis, the exterior remained largely unchanged. So we thought, how can we show just how durable this new car is? Why don't we do a modern day trialer, a modern day overland Morgan? And we just drew a silly sketch. There was no intent behind it. And then somebody noticed this and said, this is a dream. Let's go and do a classic Dakar. And so we just built the car. The next week I was sat with Rally Raid UK and
they didn't make enough of them. They did not make enough of them.
And they were brilliant. It just showed how much fun you can have.
The 60 is amazing.
For the customer and for us.
Every time, because there's a few of us that talk about we find ourselves getting into debate between the CXT and the Dakar, the Porsche Dakar. Yeah. And we're going, which would you have? Which would you have?
Just remember, and it's like, the Dakar from Porsche and the Lamborghini, or whatever it's called, thingy, They all came after Morgan. We were the first to start that trend.
I'm not arguing with you. I'd have had the CXT, and I still have one. But everybody spec'd them in left-hand drive because they all went to Europe, you know. Yeah. And that's it retains their value better in Europe as well if it's left-hand drive.
That's right.
But so I'm already jealous about that. And when that does bring me on to this whole 911 comparison. I mean, I've been doing it myself for ages because I own a 911. Also, I own a Plus 6. I also own a Yaris GR. So I'm really privileged with cars that perform and handle really well. I also have a Suzuki Jimny. Oh my God. Well, it's just the most...
A new one or an early one?
No, a new one.
Yeah,
a new one.
Great.
And I've got 4.5 acres of woodland. That is one of the most fun cars I've got to drive. But what I've noticed with the Supersport is that when we were talking about, because obviously we got to chat about the car before launch, and then obviously I'm privileged to be here with Mr. Richard Hammond, who I tittered around with and didn't actually get to talk to him at all. We never talked about it being as aligned with a 911. It wasn't anything that was said. We didn't discuss it. What we were talking about was the fact that actually, look where we're going. Look how this has developed and how it's changed. And yet, Sam from See Through Glass and a couple of others, not Harry so much, but reviewers have immediately gone, it's not a 911. It would be beaten by a 911 on every test. Yet, now that annoys me slightly because if you put the Morgan up against a Range Rover, it would be beaten on every test that was relating to going off-road, but wouldn't in other areas. Because I don't think it's the correct comparison. So how did it make you feel?
People do scrabble around to compare a Morgan to another car, but in truth, we're in a bit of a disadvantaged position there because you can't really compare what Morgan offers to other car companies because we offer something so uniquely. No one hand makes a car to the extent we do in these volumes, of course. Other people do at smaller levels. But a lot of cars are hand assembles, a lot of cars are touched by hand along with robots, but we are really hand making cars.
Yes.
We physically touch and hammer and bend and carve and sand.
Yeah, when I think of other companies that actually do a little bit of craftsmanship themselves, it would be people like Bentley, Rolls-Royce.
Great job, amazing wood shop, incredible craftsmen at Bentley, no doubt. You know, on top of a robotic built chassis and
everything else.
German powertrain and everything. We have a German powertrain, of course. So to this extent, no one's hand making them. We offer such a small volume, we're able to have personal human relationships with all of our customers. And again, lots of smaller outfits do, but at this level, that's quite unique. The whole experience of buying a Morgan is very different to buying a 911. Both have their merits and their disadvantages for sure. But all of those things considered, it's quite a different proposition. To say we competed with Lotus or Aston or Porsche, maybe on some levels we do. If you looked at performance and top trump stuff or price, there are some comparatives you could draw. But holistically, we believe we're quite unrivaled in a holistic kind of approach. That being said, an objective for us, we believe that the Plus 4 and Plus 6 are brilliant cars. They've got brilliant powertrains. We're a brilliant supplier of engines.
I'm massively biased here, John. I'm not in a way.
In a car that is significantly lighter than the vehicles they're intended for and has got a lot of storytelling and all the other components. We believe they're fantastic cars. But you rarely see a Morgan in a group test. You rarely see a Morgan up against other stuff in a group test. And the objective for Supersport really is to create a car that can be in a group test with some of these other premium segment sports cars without directly trying to go into competition with them, because we intend to offer something very different. But we wanted Morgan to be sort of recognised as a very modern, relevant sports car.
Yeah, as an alternative for people where they can put their money.
Exactly. And we have seen at times when people are, car enthusiasts and they might drive an Aston Martin or a Porsche, because, inherently you've got to love the cars at the point you're investing in a machine like that. But, lots of people have them and they want something that is a little bit more of a sense of occasion, because a Morgan for me is a sense of occasion. You can daily a 911 and it'd be brilliant, but when you get in the Morgan, it's a different experience. It's a sense of theatre, a bit of occasion. It's a different, you get a different reaction, you give a different reaction. And so it might raise the eyebrows of a lot of these buyers, but they come into the factory and, often you buy a Morgan as part of a relationship with your partner, with your wife, your husband, and you decide to go and consider a Morgan together, and there's a little bit less luggage convenience, or there's a little bit more wind noise, or there's nowhere to put your phone, or you do like listening to music because you do spend time in cars.
Yeah.
And you know, to put a +6 around a corner with all the power and the very analog nature takes some real engagement, and some drivers just want a little bit more of the natural confidence that a 911 would give them without having to think quite so much all the time. So it's just all those little 1%, no one seminal thing, but you put them together and you get quite a different product proposition. And I think then all of a sudden, actually, I might legitimately think about getting out of my 911 and getting into a Morgan for sure. I could see that now. It's definitely always going to be the wild card. You know, we're not, but again, we're only trying to make 150, 180 a year. We're not trying to compete with those levels.
It's interesting though, because you
say
you're
glad it's a wild card.
Well, yeah,
now.
this is it. Because why would you not be the wild card? Because
Yeah.
you don't want to be the mass-produced person that's
Exactly.
sitting alongside a Porsche,
Exactly.
because then that makes you
Exactly.
BMW or it makes you
it's nice.
Mercedes.
I'm glad it is coming into those conversations now. That, you know, we had the Supercar Owners Club here the other day, and you know, everyone knows Morgan until they know Morgan. You know, they come here and think, oh yeah, I know Morgan, or my dad's father had one, or everyone's got a Morgan story somewhere.
Yes.
But then they come around the factory and they see the level of technology and they're like, whoa, I had no idea. And then they see the level of craftsmanship and like, crikey, this is like, you know, having a suit made for me or a bespoke kitchen. This is real high level craftsmanship. And they're kind of really excited. And then the history and everything else is almost a given.
Own a car.
Then they drive it and they go, I did not expect it to go down a road that well.
But it's not just the driving it. That's the other thing that infuriates me as an owner. I did make a comment once on, I think it was on LinkedIn, and something recently had happened before that where it was a really premium event, and there was lots of people that I aspire to be as upper class as they are, if you want to use a class system, swanning around the cars. And my comment was, you can smile when you get into one of these, but I smile because I own one of these.
Yeah, that's it.
Because I get to do that. And that's one of the things that annoys me with the reviewers is one, they don't necessarily understand the purpose of the car or the positioning of the car. So that a review from the wrong position will make the car wrong.
That's right.
Or it could make it right, depending on how you come to that.
That's the challenge of being so nuanced, you know.
Because you're waiting for someone to actually understand who you are. I think Harry from Harry's Garage really got it with.
Even then, if you saw his video on the +4, you know, there was the kind of, I've never really been interested in Morgan, didn't really get it.
Well, he only got it because of Evo, put it in a test.
Right, and then he drove it. I was like, crikey, I just had no idea.
Yeah.
And you know, there was an amazing little, you know, some of the press drives on Supersport recently. There was some guys getting in the car going, crikey, I did not expect this thing to go like this. Just no idea. Morgan
but they
were just
never driven
quietly
anything
doing
else.
this in the background. I had no idea they were up there. And that's, you know, it's kind of our biggest frustration. We kind of just want to scream at the world, just like, you know, look how interesting this is.
I'm trying to think of it. Henry Catchpole. When he reviewed the CX platform +6 and +4,
Yeah.
that's when I started to take Morgan seriously as a car that I wanted to frivolously spend some money on, because that's how I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be my summer drive.
That's it, yeah.
And I went from the +4 quickly into +6 to get the right car for me. And it is my go-to drive.
Yeah.
Because I've owned Morgans now for about 4 years or 3 years, and I've had 3. So I've gone through them quite quickly. I'm going to have my 3rd soon. And all that time I've had a 911 992. My 911 992, I've smiled in that car because of the drive, the actual driving of that car and being in it. Oh, the last time I can remember doing that actually was this weekend, which is the first time in years I've driven it, and it's actually made me feel this is great.
Yeah.
And it was all about the roads, not about the car.
Interesting, yeah.
Whereas every time I get into my Morgan, I go, here I am. This is just nice. And okay, with my +6, I drive away. The hardtop isn't fitted the way the Supersport hardtop is fitted, so it's a little bit clunky.
Yeah.
And when I originally had my +4, that really got on my nerves.
Yeah.
It was something I hadn't expected, but then I expected it, and then today I drove the Supersport.
Yeah.
Now I'm not going to do a full review of the Supersport just yet because, I want to do a proper review of it against my +6.
Great, yeah.
Because I think for owners of Morgans, they'll understand the transition.
It'd be fascinating to hear that one,
But just getting it driving up the road, and there wasn't an immediate clonk from the hardtop settling and whatever it happened to be. that level, it was almost like, it's like you had listened to everything I'd been saying in my head to get that car to the point where I would get rid of my Porsche.
To be honest, this is the nice thing about Morgan. We have such a close relationship with our customers, and you know, the lack of seeing changes come along quickly isn't for a lack of wanting to do them sometimes, and it does take a certain program to come along to enable some of these changes because of the resource investment, all the rest of it. But Morgan's quality, you know, what I've seen in the last 15 years is just night and day doesn't even describe it in terms of how different they are in terms of the quality nowadays. But over the last couple of years in particular, quality is the first word out of our mouths with regard to any conversation nowadays. And we are taking big strides in the right direction. We're not perfect, and we never will be. Quality is a never-ending game, but that definitely is the focus for us. Sure.
You know,
I mean, the cars you've driven today, the first off the line would be pilot cars and VP cars and our own fleet vehicles, where, you know, often they will be sort of ex-engineering prototypes and things, but the customers' cars coming off the lines now are, you know, a much higher quality than we've ever seen before. Our own dealers are telling us that, you know,
they're good.
We've changed the game here. You know, this is a different level. So we're pleased that baseline position is exactly where it should be nowadays. But yeah, no, it's exciting times for the company, really. We're in a very stable position. A lot of the investments we've been making over the past few years are now starting to come good. Midsummer's been a fantastic project for us. Stuff on the pipeline, stuff in the project plan's very exciting coming up. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how much I need to loosen my wallet for what's coming next. To be
honest, there's a really nice cadence to projects now. They come in, you know, not too frequently, not infrequently, and each one is quite a different project proposition too, which is quite exciting. So nothing's going to tread on the toes of things that we've currently got to. It's good.
Like I said, I think you've got this really nice platform now to be able to springboard and do these extras, knowing that you've got a really solid base which will appeal to a really broad market.
Yeah.
No, John, thank you so much for your time.
No, that's cool.
Is there anything that you want to add?
No,
check my meeting
none at all.
time.
Yeah, just we've got to leg it to a meeting in 2 minutes. But no, nothing at all really. I think you know, it's really just thanks for the enthusiasm. You know, it's what kind of makes it all worthwhile. You know, being able to chat with you about your experiences and understand what it feels like to be on the receiving end is what fuels us to make the decisions we make. So. Very grateful for that. Thank you so much, and you know, look forward to keep talking.
The pleasure is all mine. I have to say,
no,
it's been quite a privilege to get to meet you, and I think I'm catching up with Matt at some point as well.
Yeah.
I mean, how many motor companies do you get to sit down with a chief designer and go, hey, why are you so cheerful? You know. So thank you very much indeed.
No worries.
Cheers.
Thank you. Nice one. Very good.
Very
good. Well, hopefully that got all recorded and worked and we're good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not just worried about my boomy voice over the top of where your microphone was, but we will see.